ready. Yeah.
When Blueface went to jail, he came out with more face tattoos. To understand why an environment of total restriction might trigger that specific reaction, we need to see three parts of his chart colliding under extreme pressure. Jail is the ultimate loss of autonomy. It is a pure Saturn environment of rules, restriction, and punishment. For someone with Blueface chart, this does not just create an emotional crisis, it creates a psychological crisis of identity and power. Remember, his operating system, he has no water planets and massive air dominance, so he processes experiences through strategy rather than emotional release. Jail activates his moon in Gemini in the 8th house, forcing his mind into hyper strategic survival mode inside an inescapable threat. This extreme environment forces collision between two other powerful placements. The first is Chiron and Scorpio in the 1st house, which represents the identity wound. The second is Mars and Libra in the 12th house, opposite Saturn and Aries, which creates the pressure cooker. Chiron sits at 1 degree Scorpio in his 1st house. Scorpio governs vulnerability and the fear of being betrayed or controlled. The first house represents identity and self, so his core wound is that his identity feels fundamentally unsafe and vulnerable to destruction. In jail, that fear becomes reality because the system has literally taken his freedom, his control, and his ability to define himself on his own terms. Now, the pressure cooker. Mars represents action and assertion. His Mars sits in Libra in the 12th house, which means his anger and drive operates through passive, hidden, indirect channels. And this Mars opposes Saturn in Aries. Saturn represents restriction, authority, and external limits. This opposition creates massive internal pressure where the urge to act and assert himself is constantly blocked by external restriction. Jail is the ultimate manifestation of Saturn's control, so the pressure to reclaim his identity against the system becomes unbearable. So what does a chart like this do in a cage? It seeks to reclaim the only thing left, which is sovereignty over the self. When you cannot control your environment, you may aggressively redefine your identity within it. For someone with Chiron, the wound marker, in the 1st house of self and body, the body becomes the primary canvas for this reclamation. Because there are no water planets to process the fear and humiliation emotionally, his air-dominant mind operates in survival calculation mode. The problem is that the system has physically conquered and confined him, which activates his 1st house wound. The goal becomes reclaiming absolute ownership of his identity and power on his own terms. The only solution available is to use the only form of agency left. This is his physical body. So the face tattoo in jail can be seen as a physical manifestation of his chart under duress. This is not necessarily a cold, calculated business decision. This is more like the inevitable output of a system where survival is processed intellectually. Core identity feels fundamentally viable through Chiron and Scorpio in the 1st house, and the pressure to assert oneself against authority has no lawful outlet through Mars opposite Saturn. The tattoos are a declaration written on the only territory he still controlled, which is his own skin. The logic is roughly this: you have taken my freedom, but you do not own my identity. I will define it permanently on my own terms. His Mars finally found expression against Saturn's restriction by permanently altering the 1st house to embody the Chiron wound on his terms. He marked himself before the system could mark him. You could call this control through calculated self-determination.